So first up, I would like to invite Amy Arundel, a good friend of mine personally, I might say. She used to be the physiotherapist at Brooklyn Nets, but now she works at Red Bull. And we got a really good Formula One driver apparently in your ranks. A few, eh?
Thank you so much.
There you go.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a huge honor to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. I might have some slides eventually. There we go. So thank you again. Thank you for having me. I got this wonderfully broad topic that I sent multiple different directions to Everett to say, which way would you like me to take this? Because I feel like within managing the healthy athlete's performance, we could go probably one of 9,000 to 1,200 different ways. So here's where I decided to take it. I decided to kind of break it down a little bit. And a lot of what I'm going to present today is what actually I do in my day-to-day. Because as much as we try to practice evidence-based science, sometimes we actually don't have evidence for everything that we do. Sometimes it comes back to the conversations that we have and the relationships that we have, and that's actually the importance of what we do. So if we take managing the healthy athlete's performance, let's start with the words. Managing healthy performance. Well, what's actually our role? That's probably the more important piece. For some of the athletes that I work with, and now I'm seeing this on a big screen, you can't really see the writing in this, so that's really good on me. For some of the athletes that I've worked with, we have a whole team around them. They've got coaching, social support. They've got an agent. They've got a team. They've got an organization behind them. But they may also have a full performance battery behind them. Psychology, nutrition, physio, doctor, sports science, strength and conditioning. An amazing wealth of resources. A lot of the athletes that I work with on a day-to-day basis, this is their circle though. They have their social support, they might have a sponsor or a coach, and they've got us as a physio. There's a much different team around them. So our role is going to change. My role is going to change, and my interactions are going to change. But it comes back to my relationship with that athlete. How important my role, how big a role I play for that athlete comes back to my relationship with that athlete. Now, we do have some good evidence behind relationships. We know good communication can support better injury prevention or lower injury burdens. We know having a bit of a safety net around that athlete. We know having good relationships and communication is beneficial for our athletes. But what does that actually look like? What does that actually entail? Well, Charlotte actually went into what is that therapeutic alliance and what's important to physios, what's important to elite athletes. Now, I do have to qualify that a lot of the physios in this study were quite young. But I think what they took out of this is still really important. Trust comes as a fundamental to our working relationship with an athlete. To an athlete working with us. We've got to have trust. We have to trust that athlete that they're going to respect us. That athlete has to trust us that we have their best interest in mind. That what we're going to do is going to be beneficial and it's going to be a partnership. Ta-da! There we go, that's it. Communication, right? Not just what we're talking about when it comes to what we're doing in treatment, what our goals are, but actually that small talk can be valuable, right? That small talk starts to set up that bond that we have with that athlete. It sets up the forefront for then having deeper conversations, which we probably need to have. In some cases, that might be about an injury that we're working on. In some cases, that might be the stressors that athlete's going through. In some cases, that might be something really, really heavy, whether that's depression or mental health. That social bond sets up that professional bond, that trust, that working relationship, that we're going to sit together. We're going to establish what's important to you as an athlete. We're going to set out goals for what we're working towards, and we're going to set out a plan of how we're going to achieve that. Now, there are pieces of the elite athlete And there's part of those pieces to the physio that become important to this. On the elite athlete side, it seems to be taking responsibility for some of the things that they're doing. taking on pieces that they have control over. On the physio side, that's helping that athlete understand what those pieces they have control over are. What are the things that they can do on their own? Helping them feel independent. Time, we all wish we had more time. But that time, especially making the most of the time that you're together, seems to be very, very important. And making time when something comes up it seems to be extremely valuable. And then we can take the other pieces like pressure, adversity, and external factors. How we approach those as a team, as a therapeutic alliance, is very, very important to the bond that you have as a physio, as a doctor, as a clinician or practitioner, and as an athlete. So this therapeutic alliance is crucial. This therapeutic alliance is going to determine the success of your working relationship, as well as in my role, it also determines how much I end up doing with an athlete. And it's not what we can control, but actually what I can influence. What an athlete allows me to influence, what they invite me in to be part of their lives and part of their competitive journey, is what are those pieces that I can influence or I can help influence. So rather than managing, maybe the better way to think about this is actually supporting. So we'll use two of the athletes that I work with on a regular basis. On the right-hand side is Therese Tabel. She's a kiteboarder. She's a good example of one of those athletes who has a very, very small support system. She's got a sponsor. She has actually no coaching staff, her social support system, and then myself and our team at the APC. We stand as her team. And then Brian Oko, who's one of the Red Bull Salzburg players. A great example of somebody who has a wealth of resources around him. Not only does he have a team at Red Bull Salzburg, but he then also has the team at Red Bull Athlete Performance Center. So my role for these athletes is going to look different, whether they're coming through rehab. So both of these athletes are coming back from ACLs. So for Therese, that looks like a gym-based training and then on water by herself in Brazil. I would love to go to Brazil. If somebody wants to fund that, happily go and support Therese in Brazil. But she's doing her return to water on her own, alone in Brazil. And her return to competition, to the GK kiting tour, will be on her own. Versus Brian, who's with us, working through his early stages of rehab. He'll then go back to the Red Bull Salzburg for on-field and individual training, back into a full team training, back into reserve team games, into full team games. So the resources and my role in both of these athletes' performance in a rehab standpoint is different, but also when they're healthy. When Teresa is back on water, she's back on tour, my role is to help support her training plans and her progressions, to help her monitor herself, right? To help and educate and be that sounding board. So I can recommend, hey, let's think about doing a daily wellness. She already knows how to monitor her knee. So she keeps track of those trends. And when something comes up, I'm there then as that phone call. Hey, my knee's a little bit swollen. Here's what I've got coming up. What do you think I should do? Here's what I think I should do. Most of the time, that's my question. What do you think you should do? Most of the time, she tells me and we're good. But being that sounding board, empowering her to take that step to say, what are the things I need to do on a daily basis to make sure I'm ready to train or I'm ready to compete? So for Brian, that looks different, right? For Brian, he's got a team who's asking him his daily wellness. He's got a team who's going to be monitoring his training load and adjusting accordingly. They monitor strength, jump height, range of motion, swelling, pain. He maybe has a little more passive role in this if he wants it. He could take a more active role. But again, my role as a physio, my role in supporting these athletes is different. And so my engagement with this process has to be with that athlete and what their priorities are, as well as what's around them. What do they need? So what if we shift gears a little bit? What about healthy? If we use the WHO, or the World Health Organization's definition of healthy, right, it would be the state of complete physical, mental, social well-being, not merely the absence of disease. That sounds like a pretty ideal state, right? I think all of us are looking for that. But whose definition do we use? WHO's definition is great, but I've had athletes come in to say, I know I'm here to talk about my knee, but actually, my goal is actually to work on some other pieces, right? So this athlete came in and said, I know I'm here to actually do rehab for my knee. My goal is to have a healthier lifestyle. So this was 3 weeks before a knee surgery. He actually quit smoking cold turkey. He'd smoked about a pack a day and was a breakdancing world champion. He quit smoking cold turkey. I had nothing to do with that. I cannot claim any responsibility for that. That was all him. But in coming to have that visit and have that conversation about what are your goals, he set that as the first piece. He worked with our team, our nutritionists, and our mental performance specialists, and they set out how are you going to change your diet? What makes sense for you? And that took some tweaking, right? He finished rehab with us. He went home. He gained about it was actually more like 5 kilograms of weight. He was super frustrated with that. There's some athletes that would love that. He was like, I am way too bulky. We worked with him to refine that. So healthy is going to be different for each athlete, for how it's going to happen, and for when it's going to happen, right? For you, whether we're thinking about the physical, the mental, or the sports side of an athlete's health, you need a team around you, right? I am not a specialist in nutrition. I am not a specialist in sleep. I am not a specialist in mental performance. Do I know small pieces? Yes. But this is part of my team. These are the people that I say, you know what? I don't know that answer. Let's go talk to this person. Let's make this a priority for you. This is coming up in our conversations. I don't have this skill set. I need to know when I need you to have further support, right? Creating those relationships beyond just my role are as important as my role. And in some ways, actually, will further encourage our relationship with that athlete. You guys in this room, and on the internet, think about who is your team. Who are the people that when you get stuck with a question, who do you go to, right? This is just a smattering of people, right? The people that I thought of first, in some of the areas that I thought of first. But we can deep dive. Who do you go to when you have an ankle question, when you have a hip question, when you have a low back question? None of us can know everything, but having our team around us so that we know when to refer an athlete is crucial to that healthy performance. So for Therese, on a daily basis, my support of their health, Therese is doing a college degree while being a professional kiteboarder. All right? She's vegetarian. I can't handle, I don't know what to do to help an athlete with a vegetarian diet, make sure she gets all the protein that she needs when she's out on the water most of the day, right? Stephen Smith, our nutritionist, is the one who I said, I need your help with this. What I can do is help talk through how do you balance your obligations of university and maintaining your schedule. When that gets too much, I know I've got our mental performance team to help with that, right? Brian, he's 19 years old. He's been in an academy system for a large portion of his professionally adult life. For me, my role is different, right? He's got a different team around him, but helping him understand the resources and the professionalism that he needs to have to show up on time and why that's important. Those professional pieces are more that healthy relationship, healthy support that he needs. And then the big one, right? What is performance? Well, if we go back to a definition, because definitions are a good starting place, the act of carrying out or accomplishing an action, task, or function. That is wonderfully broad. Well, we'll put a Dutch athlete in here for you guys. Often when we think of performance, we think of competition and we think of success. We think of winning. We think of the elite level. But there's other pieces to performance. This is Vlad Descula. He's a Hungarian mountain biker. In Mount St. Anne, a World Cup stop, he hit a tree. So he was in the top 3. He was having a phenomenal race. He hit a tree, broke his nose, broke ribs, bruised a quad. He looks like he walked out of a burning building. For him, finishing this race, which he did, is performance. This is Saya Sakagabara. She's a BMX racer out of Australia. She and her brother started racing together. And in 2019, Kai, her brother, had a traumatic brain injury while racing. Whole right side was paralyzed, and he's still working through the repercussions of that traumatic brain injury. They will have lifelong repercussions. In the Tokyo Olympics, Saya was pegged as the likely gold medal winner. In the semifinals, she had a horrific crash, was not treated great, a really bad concussion. She's out for 6 months. For Saya, living is performance, right? The decision to go back to BMX racing after the Olympics, and actually a subsequent concussion, right? Performance is going to be very, very different for each of our athletes. But going back to that communication, going back to that relationship, understanding what that performance is for that athlete, and what are the qualities to that performance that they may need support with is huge. So what can we influence? Well, we can have a needs analysis. We can sit down and have a conversation of where are you? Where do you want to go? How do we build that plan? What are those gaps? How do we build you up to be where you need to be? And those are in different realms: physical, mental, sport components. We can help sit down and identify the demands of that sport, identify how we're going to assess those, establish our expectation or our goal, and then we assess. We train and we reassess. But that has to be through the process of collaboration and prioritization. I've made this mistake. I sat down with a mountain biker and I said, here's the things I think would be really good for you to achieve before you're back. He's coming back from a collarbone. And he went, none of that's hard enough. You've said plank, you've said push-up. I need to be able to do a plyometric push-up and a bent over 60-pound row. You set the bar too low. I went, you're right, I did. The mistake I made was making the assumption that I knew. I don't know. I don't know the demands of what it actually means to be on a bike going down a mountain at incredible speeds. I don't. You do. My first step needed to be, what do you think? What do you feel like you need to do to be able to get back? And then let's work together to build that process back. We did. We have a great relationship, and he went on to win the world championship. That's not my doing, though. That is the hard work that he put in and the plan that we put together. Sometimes we do know the demands, right? Sometimes we do have evidence for what the demands are. We know quad strength is important for preventing ACL re-injuries, preventing subsequent knee injuries. Sometimes there's obvious things we can pick out. We can pick out things like sleep or nutrition to say, all right, maybe these are pieces that will help your performance, that will help you recover to make sure that you're ready for the next round. But a lot of times we don't really know. Again, come back to that relationship, come back to that communication, come back to the trust that we have in working together. So what's our role? What can we influence? And how can we be the best support? And sometimes that role is just sitting in a back seat and watching our athletes do what they do best, right? Sometimes our role is being the cheerleader, very nerdy cheerleaders, right? Nerdy cheerleaders, sometimes with opinions about what should happen. But we're cheerleaders, we're supporters, and that's probably the biggest impact we can have. Thank you very much.
We still planned a few minutes for
Okay.
questions. So if there are any questions, we have a microphone here. Can I just grab this one? Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions for Amy? Don't be shy. She's
Too
here
early
now.
in the morning.
Do you know?
First, a compliment, obviously, for a great performance of yourself early in the morning. Um, you know, it's just it's a kind of a might be a silly question, but I would like to have your answer. You do expect your athlete to be good at communication and good in what is good for her or for him. From a doctor's perspective, I really like your approach. I hope I do the same. But sometimes I get this question mark back and say, "Well, that's your job, doc."
Yeah.
So how do you perform that?
I don't think that it's a great question, and I don't think there's a blanket answer. So I put Brian up there with the example of learning to be a professional athlete. Brian's not great, and he knows this. So I'm not you know um, violating any patient confidentiality. He's not great at reflecting, right? If you ask him, how was this week? What were the good things? What are the bad things? Generally, it was like, no, it was great. It was awesome. Well, Brian, we can list 3 things that I think went well. He'll go, oh yeah, no, that did go well. Here's a couple of things that maybe we should work on. Oh yeah, okay. And it's taken actually a lot of time with Brian to say, all right, your job tonight is to go home and actually write down what are the good things, what went well, what didn't go well. I have that luxury, right? I know you don't necessarily have that luxury, right? That luxury of time, especially in developing those relationships, is really important, but you sometimes don't have it. So I think building also the kind of question bank of, can I build past, what are those open questions to allow someone to start telling their story? Maybe it's sometimes just, what's your story? Sometimes I think those pieces can actually open those doors to get them storytelling, to get them reflecting. But that doesn't always work. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes a little bit of prying.
I think it's a great answer. Thank you very much. Especially for the young doctors. One of my messages is always, if you can't, you should beat your ongeduld. I don't know ongeduld now. Impatience. Beat your own impatience, and then you will help us. So that's exactly what you answered. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Time for one more. There's one question in the back.
I saw your team. You have a differentiation between mental performance team and sport psychology.
Yeah.
How do you? I can imagine that this ends up in a gray area, and where does this mental performance end up in actually being a sport performance? It has a goal as a sport performance. Can you tell something about this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So where I work, so Red Bull Athlete Performance Center, we call everything kind of mental performance. But within mental performance, that's the range of everything from clinical psychology, sports psychology, all the way to more like cognitive training, and we'll say kind of mental tasks that we're trying to improve performance with. So we've actually got a range on our staff of clinical and sports psychologists who are working more on the like clinical psych side or the sports psychology side, thinking about maybe that's relaxation, maybe that's sleep, maybe that's focus. What is your preparation before going into a race or a competition? And then we actually do arrange, and this is actually one of the places where I have a lot of fun, is within rehab, building in how do we make sure we're training our athletes neurocognitively? How do we make sure that they're getting cognitive challenge and facing cognitive fatigue during rehab so that they're not suddenly going, all right, in a clinic, in a gym, and then overwhelmed by what they feel when they're back on the court or on the field. So it's a little bit of an umbrella term, but within, for us, we have kind of a spectrum of what we still term all as mental performance.
Last question.
Thank you for your presentation. You talk about the therapeutic relationship you have with the athlete, and how much do you dive into the personal or social relationship, and does that overlap?
Yeah, so I think that depends on the athlete. Each athlete's going to have a different comfort level with where the boundary of our relationship is. So I have some athletes who will come in and they will tell me entire dating histories. We'll chat about, what's going on the weekend. I might even know what they ate for dinner last night. I may not want to know that, but I do. Right? There's some athletes who that boundary is a little bit different. We're going to chat more about, the game that happened over the weekend, what's coming up, what they're thinking, sport-related wise. So that relationship varies, I think, athlete to athlete. Now, there is a professional boundary that I set, right? Like, that's for all of us very important to this therapeutic alliance. But our conversations and how that relationship works out is very different athlete to athlete. And a lot of that has to do with, what do we share in common, right? Some of us, we can chat about football and every game that happened on the weekend. For some things, I don't know what happened in the NBA 2K final last weekend. So the relationship that we have, those shared interests, that common bond that we share is going to differ. And I think, kind of being okay with that, right? There's some athletes that I may not be the best physio for. Somebody else may share more interests and maybe a better physio for. Being okay with that, I think, is very important too.
Thank you, Amy. One more round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks.